Some lessons come too late, but it's never too late to learn them. Today, we are talking about the wisdom every woman deserves to hear, whether she received it from her mother or not. Welcome to Bloomera, and welcome to part 4 of the Mother Wound series. You don't have to have a mother wound to gain from this episode, because in this powerful interview, Micah Larsen joins us once again to share the important lessons about womanhood, boundaries, mental health, self-trust, and emotional care that many of us never heard while growing up. This episode is a reclamation, a gathering of truths to guide you on your own path, no matter where you started. Let's get straight into the call. So your podcast, Modern Hysteria, covers taboos of womanhood. Why do you think these topics have been stigmatized for so long?
Man, okay, like where's my soapbox?
Right.
Okay.
Stand up on it.
Okay, this is really like my area of interest. In graduate school, I started studying health communication and social influence and evolution. I was already a feminist, but I really started to dig into the why, this question. And then I started to experience my own medical side quests. And I had like the lived experience and the empiric evidence to see like, okay, there's a long history of women's silence. And a lot of this is because of the culture in which we live is built on patriarchal control. Patriarchy is an export from Europe and traveled to North America. And I'm actually reading a book called The Patriarchs right now. And it's actually like looking 7,000 years ago, people moving from the Eurasian steppe into now what we know as Europe. Like we can trace back patriarchal culture to 7,000 years ago. And for me, it helps to understand, like my husband has said, if I was an object, I would be a garden spade because I have to dig, and I will never stop digging until I get to like the bottom of it. But we know now, like patriarchy, which is a system of oppression that is a lot of times unconscious in our beliefs and just kind of like woven into the fabric of our culture. It benefits from women's silence about our medical issues because in a patriarchy, women are most valued for our appearances. And our appearance has to fit into this like very narrow beauty standard of like young, white, unfortunately, if we're talking about like the very traditional sense of beauty standard, thin, ageless. And those things they're unrealistic expectations for most people. And when it comes to medical misogyny, like there's so much silence about things like menopause, PMS, PMDD, endometriosis, because women were really left out of medical research for hundreds of years. It wasn't until the 70s that women were required to be in studies for drugs to see how they affect the female body. And I use the word female just we're talking about biologically, but also AFAB, assigned female at birth people as well. But the reason that my podcast is called Modern Hysteria is because hysterical, a term used to describe women who are emotional or had mental illness, legitimate mental illness all the way to regular emotions. Hysteria comes from the root word hystera, which is a word from ancient Greek describing a wandering uterus. And like Aristotle wrote about this, that the womb in a woman's body would like travel around if it was sad and empty, and it would disrupt her humors and cause emotional upset. And she couldn't be trusted because an empty womb was a sad womb. And so the cure for hysteria was to have sex, which is so convenient for people who want to have sex with women.
I want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. That's the long answer. It's just like there's a common thread that weaves through hundreds of years. And we're now with the advent of social media, especially in a post-Me Too world, we're talking about these things more. Menopause is having a moment right now, as the New York Times says. So like now we're noticing that the taboos.
And hopefully becoming more integrated into medical research. I have an upcoming interview with NChem and Defo, and she talks about how the women were excluded, like even recently, from some trauma research because their periods and the fluctuating hormones were just like not a good baseline for them, and it was just like inconvenient for them, so they just got rid of from the study, and it's the like just having a uterus can exclude you from a lot of medical research, and that's so unfortunate.
Yeah, and that's been the excuse for decades is like the fact that you have a menstrual cycle makes you like we can't control for that. And so that may affect the very like be an extra variable in a study and therefore it's just easier not to have women. But okay, hi, I don't have a uterus anymore. In fact, I do. It's in a jar on the shelf over here. And so like I'm a perfect candidate for medical research because I don't have a cycle anymore. So you're welcome to include me in a study. It's just been like an excuse
Yeah.
that so we don't know like how a lot of drugs, as I'm sure you're going to talk about, affect women differently, or we're starting to figure it out.
Yeah, which is so unfair too, because it's like this is my normal. This is my constant, like throughout the month. Like it changes, but that is my constant. And I know not
Yeah.
every regular periods or a uterus, like you say.
Yeah.
But this is something that is a part of our everyday life, and it's wild to not be included.
It's wild. And like now we're starting to see why things should be studied at different points in the menstrual cycle. For example, research suggests just from the past few years that if you experience trauma during the luteal phase of your cycle, that it's coded differently in your brain as especially traumatic, if I remember correctly. And it is important and helpful to know how those things affect our body, period.
Mhm.
Excuse the pun, but also like our body experiences things differently depending on where we are in our cycle, and our stress hormones and our sex hormones are interlinked.
Mhm. And even just understanding it, you can also utilize it in a lot of ways. People who do cycle syncing, or I work a lot of my work around my period and my
Yeah.
cycle. Sometimes I'm more creative, sometimes I'm more social, sometimes I'm doing more editing and more like reclusive. And if you can begin to understand that and even just learn it for yourself, you can use it to your advantage, even if the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so wise.
Mhm. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about women's mental health?
I think one of them is that women are just more emotional. Like having the public conversation when Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton are running for president about like, well, you can't give them the nuclear codes because what if they're PMSing and they like decide to bomb someone, which is like so incredibly ironic to me because like, oh, I don't really think that the women are the people who are getting so upset about like their Teslas right now. But like women have been historically socialized to display different emotions than men. For men, masculinity aligns with like aggression and dominance. And like those are the emotional states that are acceptable for men to display. And women are socialized that it is okay to feel like sad to some extent. And so it's really like a flawed system of what we've been taught is okay for us to display. Men are just as emotional as women. People of all genders have emotions and should be able to display those emotions. Or that hormones make women irrational, that therapy and medication are weaknesses. I think this is something that impacts people of all genders. We need to keep showing up as caretakers, regardless of our health and like to our own detriment, and that it's weak to need therapy or medication. I had my own baggage about that for a long time, and I was not medicated for anxiety and depression, and I should have been. I think like for me personally, the biggest mental health misconception for women is it's all in your head. And I have experienced this multiple times. So many people who have listened to my podcast have told me the same thing, is that they have been dismissed. They've found their very real medical concerns to be unacknowledged, kind of explained away. And we know that women in pain, like when they show up to the emergency room, they're more likely to be prescribed antipsychotic, like psych meds, than men when they have like the same physical ailments. And it shows that like this is something that again, it goes back to women being expected to be silent about their medical issues, and the lack of empirical research on how medical conditions affect women just like makes it all that easier to explain away.
Mhm. If there's one taboo topic that you think women need to be talking more about, what would it be?
This is such a good question. Like I said, menopause is having a moment. I'm very anti-diet culture. I think that's so important that we call diet culture on the carpet, especially those of us who grew up in the 90s and the aughts. But I actually think that it's our anger because, like I said earlier, like men were largely socialized to understand that anger, aggression, dominance, those are okay things for men to experience and display because it made them masculine. For women, anger has always been unacceptable, like in this culture. And so we're socialized to bury it, to cover it up. Angry women is such a like angry bra burning feminist feminist is like, was such a diss, right? Like, because anger made you hysterical. But I have a podcast episode talking to a holistic therapist about like how those chronic feelings of like anger is a reaction to being trod upon. When your boundaries are forsaken, anger is a natural reaction and it's really informational, but we treat it as like something that we need to hide or that's like wrong. It's not a bad thing. And when we bury that emotion very deeply, our body doesn't forget. It's still happening. It's just not processed. And our body experiences it as stress. When that stress is not dealt with properly, it can show up as inflammation, literally in our bodies. And I say inflammation, like we use that as like a very non-specific buzzword these days in the wellness circles, but inflammation is an important natural reaction that our body has to stress. And when we have a lot of anger, stress in our lives, in our bodies are, try to fight it off like it's an invader. And chronic inflammation can sometimes show up as chronic illness. Like there's a connection there. And culturally, we're seeing that we have been trod upon and women are angry and we're seeing it come out. And it is like really easy to dismiss someone as an angry woman. But I think that like being an angry woman who processes it and communicates it may be a healthier woman.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I have a feminine rage book club and that's what we focus on. And we just recently read Rage Becomes Her by Soraya Shamali. And she talked about, and I hope I get this right. She talks about how anger is like holding water in your hands. Like the water is going to come out some way, shape, or form. Like it's going to make its way out. And just trying to hold it all in, like you can't do it. And you shouldn't. We're not made to hold in anger. Anger is meant to be processed and expressed. And again, in that conversation with Nkema Defo, she talked a lot about how anger and being reactive or triggered sometimes is just. Like if you are experiencing unjust or unsafe situations, like there is a time and place for it. It's not bad. It's not good or bad. It just is. And it's what you do with it and how you process it and what the situation calls for that matters.
That is such a beautiful metaphor, holding water in your hands. And I mean, look around. There are so many reasons for just anger, valid anger. It's a valid response to the rates of domestic violence and intimate partner homicide and sexual assault and harassment. And like those things are becoming more visible and seeing each other like express our anger. I'm a writer, so I feel like there's so much power in reading other people's words when they describe our experiences. Like putting words to someone else's experiences is the greatest honor. And writing about anger, reading about someone else's anger, about injustice is very freeing. And I think it opens the door for us to like feel that very justifiable emotion.
Well, I've got a list of feminine rage books. So if you need any recommendations, I got you.
The Feminine Rage book club, like sign me up, take all my money. Like I think that's just like, that's like hook, line, and sinker. I love it.
It's free and you're always welcome.
I love it.
I think the next one we're doing is like, I might butcher this, A Pussy's Guide to Rioting. And I'll send you the information, but
yeah,
welcome. More than welcome.
I'm on board. I'm on board.
Thank you for joining me for this mother wound series. Healing the mother wound is not easy, but you are proof that healing is possible. If this series is resonating with you, share it with someone else who could use it. Make sure you go back and listen to any parts that you may have missed. And remember, you're not broken, you're blooming. I'll see you in the next episode.